The dust kicked up beneath Natalie Sullivan's worn boots as she stumbled under the weight of another bucket filled with rock and ore. Her hands bleeding through the threadbare gloves that had long since lost their usefulness in the summer heat of 1882, San Francisco, California. She had been working in the Copper Ridge mine for 3 years now, ever since her father had died in a cave collapse, and mine owner Victor Caldwell had informed her that the debt her father supposedly owed would fall to her. A debt she had never seen proof of but had been too young and frightened to question when she was only 18 years old. Now 21, exhausted beyond measure, and without a single cent to her name despite working 14-hour days in the dark tunnels beneath the earth, Natalie had begun to lose hope that she would ever escape this nightmare. The other miners pitied her but were too afraid of losing their own positions to speak up, and Caldwell ruled his operation with an iron fist that had broken more than one man who dared to challenge his authority. She hauled the bucket up the final slope toward the sorting station, her shoulders screaming in protest, her back a constant source of agony that never seemed to ease even when she collapsed onto her thin bedroll in the women's quarters each night. The sun was setting over the hills, casting long shadows across the mining camp, and Natalie allowed herself a brief moment to look up at the sky, to remember what freedom had felt like before her world had become nothing but darkness and dust and the weight of stones. "Move faster, girl," Caldwell's foreman barked at her, his meaty hand shoving her roughly forward. "The boss does not pay for you to stand around daydreaming." Natalie bit back the bitter response that he did not pay her at all, that she had not seen a single dollar in 3 years, that the clothes on her back were the same ones she had worn when her father died, now patched and repatched until they were more thread than fabric. Speaking back only earned her reduced food rations, and she had learned the hard way that survival meant keeping her mouth shut and her head down. She was emptying the bucket when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching the camp, steady and purposeful. Visitors were not uncommon, as merchants and gamblers and men looking for work often passed through, but something about these particular hoofbeats made her look up. A lone rider was coming down the main road into camp, sitting tall in his saddle, his broad-brimmed hat pulled low against the setting sun. Even from a distance, there was something different about him, something in the way he carried himself that spoke of confidence and capability. Nathan Irving dismounted from his horse with an easy grace, his eyes already taking in every detail of the mining camp with the practiced assessment of a man who had seen trouble in many forms and knew how to recognize it. He had been traveling south from Montana, working as a ranch hand and occasionally hiring out his gun when the situation called for it, though he preferred honest work to the violent reputation that seemed to follow men who were good with a pistol. He had heard about Copper Ridge in Sacramento, heard whispers that the mine owner was not exactly running a fair operation, and something about those whispers had pulled at him, had made him decide to see for himself what was happening in this dusty corner of San Francisco. His eyes landed on the sorting station and the young woman working there, and he felt something in his chest tighten. She was thin, too thin, her face smudged with dirt and her hands wrapped in bloody rags. Her dark hair was pulled back in a braid that hung limply down her back, and when she turned slightly, he could see the exhaustion etched into every line of her body. She looked like she was holding herself together through sheer willpower alone, and Nathan had seen enough suffering in his 30 years to recognize someone who was being worked to death. He tied his horse to the hitching post outside what appeared to be the main office and pushed through the door without knocking. The man behind the desk looked up with an expression of irritation that quickly shifted to calculating interest when he took in Nathan's well-maintained weapons and the quality of his horse visible through the window. "Can I help you, stranger?" Victor Caldwell asked, leaning back in his chair with false friendliness. He was a large man, running to fat around the middle with cold eyes that assessed Nathan like he was a piece of property to be appraised. "Looking for work," Nathan said simply, though that was not entirely true. He was looking for information, looking to confirm the whispers he had heard. "Heard you might be hiring." Caldwell's smile widened. "Always looking for capable men. Pay is fair, work is hard. What skills do you bring?" "Ranch work mostly. Cattle, horses. Can do basic carpentry and stonework." "Good with a rope." Nathan did not mention the gun, though he knew Caldwell had already noticed it. "Might have a position for you," Caldwell said slowly. "But first, let me show you around, explain how we operate here at Copper Ridge." Nathan followed the mine owner outside, listening with half an ear to the man's boastful description of his operation, while his attention kept drifting back to the young woman at the sorting station. She was working with mechanical efficiency now, her movements practiced but exhausted, and he noticed that she was the only person working that particular station, doing a job that should have required at least 3 people. "That one there," Caldwell said, noticing the direction of Nathan's gaze. "She is working off her father's debt. Lost him in a collapse 3 years back. Unfortunate business, but a debt is a debt." Nathan's jaw tightened. "How much did he owe?" $200 plus interest. "She has been making progress, of course, but the cost of her food and lodging has to be deducted from her labor value." Caldwell spoke casually, as if this were perfectly reasonable, as if he were not describing what amounted to slavery. "So she is working for no pay," Nathan said flatly. Caldwell's expression hardened slightly. "She is working off a legitimate debt. Everything is legal and documented." Nathan had heard enough. He had encountered men like Caldwell before, men who used the law as a weapon to trap the vulnerable, who hid behind papers and contracts while bleeding people dry. He had never been able to walk away from such situations, even when the smart thing would have been to mind his own business and keep riding. His mother had always said his sense of justice would get him killed someday, but he could not seem to help himself. "I would like to see those documents," Nathan said calmly. Caldwell's eyes narrowed. "That is private business between me and the girl. Now, are you actually interested in work, or are you just here to cause trouble?" "I am interested in making sure things are done right," Nathan replied, his hand resting casually on his belt near his gun, not threatening but not backing down either. "If everything is legitimate like you say, there should be no problem showing me the papers." The 2 men stared at each other for a long moment, the air between them crackling with tension. Nathan was aware of the other miners stopping their work to watch, aware of the young woman at the sorting station looking up with something like hope flickering in her exhausted eyes. Caldwell broke first, his face flushing with anger. "Get off my property. You are not welcome here." "I will leave when I am ready," Nathan said quietly, "but that girl is coming with me." The mining camp seemed to freeze. Natalie's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. This stranger, this cowboy who had ridden in out of nowhere, was challenging Caldwell for her sake. No one had ever stood up for her before, and she did not know whether to feel terrified or grateful. Caldwell's hand moved toward the pistol at his waist, but Nathan was faster. His gun was out and leveled before the mine owner had cleared leather, and the message was crystal clear. Nathan did not want to shoot anyone, but he would if he had to. "Here is how this is going to go," Nathan said, his voice steady and calm despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "You are going to get whatever papers you claim to have, and we are going to review them together. If they are legitimate and legal, we will discuss reasonable terms for settling the debt. If they are not, The young lady walks away right now, free and clear." Natalie found her voice, though it came out rough from disuse and dust. "My father never borrowed money from him. I would have known. We lived in the same house, and he told me everything about his finances." Caldwell's flush deepened. "Your father was a drunk and a gambler. What would you know about his debts?" "My father never touched alcohol in his life," Natalie said, anger finally breaking through the exhaustion and fear. "He raised me alone after my mother died, and he worked every day to give me a better life." "You are lying." "Careful, girl," Caldwell snarled. "I can make your life even more difficult." "No," Nathan said firmly. "You cannot, because she is done working for you as of right now. Go get the papers, or admit you do not have any." For a moment, Nathan thought Caldwell might actually draw anyway, might decide his pride was worth dying for. But the mine owner was a bully, and like most bullies, he was a coward at heart. When faced with someone who would not back down, someone who was faster and more capable, he crumbled. "Fine," Caldwell spat. "Take the worthless girl, but she is not getting anything she brought with her. Those clothes and blankets were provided by me, and they stay here." Nathan's eyes hardened. "She is taking her personal belongings. Do not push me." Natalie could barely believe what was happening. This man, this stranger whose name she did not even know, was freeing her, just like that. After 3 years of hopelessness, after giving up on ever escaping, rescue had arrived in the form of a tall cowboy with steady hands and a sense of justice that would not allow him to look away from injustice. She gathered her few possessions quickly, afraid that if she took too long, the spell would break and she would wake up to find this had all been a dream. She had a photograph of her parents on their wedding day, a book of poetry her father had given her for her 16th birthday, and a silver locket that had belonged to her mother. Everything else was disposable, and she left it without a second thought. Nathan kept his gun trained on Caldwell until Natalie was beside him. Then he backed toward his horse, never taking his eyes off the mine owner. He holstered his weapon only when he was mounted with Natalie sitting behind him, her arms wrapped around his waist as she held on tight. "If you come after us, it will not go well for you," Nathan said as a final warning. Then he spurred his horse forward, and they rode out of the mining camp at a gallop, leaving Copper Ridge and Victor Caldwell behind in a cloud of dust. They rode hard for the first hour, putting distance between themselves and any potential pursuit. Nathan could feel Natalie trembling behind him, though whether from fear or relief or exhaustion he could not tell. When they finally slowed to a walk, the sun had fully set and stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. "There is a town about 10 miles north," Nathan said over his shoulder. "Proper town with a sheriff and a hotel. We will go there, get you cleaned up and fed, and figure out what comes next." Natalie was crying silently, tears cutting clean tracks through the dust on her face. "Why did you do that?" she asked, her voice breaking. "You do not even know me." Nathan was quiet for a moment before answering. "My mother was trapped in a bad situation once, before I was born. A man helped her get free, did not ask for anything in return, just did what was right. She always taught me to do the same, to stand up when I see someone being hurt. I could not ride past you and do nothing." "Thank you," Natalie whispered. "Thank you so much. I thought I was going to die there." "You are safe now," Nathan assured her. "I give you my word, I will make sure you are taken care of until you can get on your feet." They rode in silence for a while longer, and Natalie became aware of how solid and warm Nathan felt, how safe she felt with her arms around him despite having just met him. She had not felt safe in 3 years, had forgotten what it was like to not be constantly afraid. The town of Miller's Creek appeared as a collection of lights in the distance, and Nathan guided his horse toward it with relief. His mare was tired from the hard riding, and he knew Natalie needed food and rest desperately. The main street was quiet at this hour. Most businesses closed for the night, but the hotel had lamps burning in the windows. Nathan dismounted and helped Natalie down, noticing how unsteady she was on her feet. He kept a supporting hand on her elbow as they walked into the hotel, where a middle-aged woman looked up from behind the desk with curiosity. "Need 2 rooms," Nathan said. "And if your kitchen is still open, hot food and a bath for the lady." The hotel keeper, a woman named Margaret who had been running the establishment for 15 years, took one look at Natalie's condition, and her expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "Kitchen closed an hour ago, but I can heat up some stew and biscuits. Bathroom is down the hall. Let me get you both settled." She handed Nathan 2 keys and quoted him a price that was fair. He paid without hesitation, then turned to Natalie. "Get yourself cleaned up and eat something. I will be right next door if you need anything." Natalie looked at him with those exhausted, grateful eyes. "I do not have any way to pay you back for this." "I am not asking you to," Nathan said gently. "Just take care of yourself. That is all I want." Margaret showed Natalie to her room and promised to bring up food and help her with the bath. Nathan retreated to his own room, suddenly feeling the weight of the day settling onto his shoulders. He had just made himself an enemy, and while Caldwell had backed down tonight, that did not mean the mine owner would let this go. Men like that had pride, and Nathan had humiliated him in front of his workers. But when he closed his eyes, all he could see was Natalie's face, the way hope had flickered to life when he had stood up for her. He had done the right thing, and he would deal with whatever consequences came. In the room next door, Natalie was discovering what it felt like to be clean for the first time in months. The hot water stung her cuts and scraped, but she did not care. She scrubbed away 3 years of dust and despair, watching the bathwater turn dark with dirt. Margaret had brought her a simple dress that was a bit too large but clean and whole, and Natalie nearly wept again at the kindness of it. The stew and biscuits tasted like the finest meal she had ever eaten. Her stomach had shrunk from years of poor rations, and she could only eat half of what was provided, but it was more than enough to make her feel almost human again. She sat on the bed, which was softer than anything she had felt in years, and tried to process everything that had happened. A cowboy had ridden into camp and freed her, just like that. It seemed impossible, like something out of the dime novels she used to read before her world had collapsed. She did not even know his name, she realized suddenly. He had saved her life and she had never asked his name. There was a soft knock at her door, and she opened it to find Nathan standing there, his hat in his hands. He had cleaned up as well, she noticed, and without the dust of the trail, she could see him more clearly. He had strong features and kind eyes, and there was something about the way he looked at her that made her feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. "Just wanted to check that you were all right," Nathan said. "Make sure you had everything you needed." "I am more than all right," Natalie said. "I still do not know how to thank you properly. I do not even know your name." "Nathan Irving," he said with a slight smile. "And you are—" "Natalie Sullivan," she replied. "And I owe you my life, Nathan Irving." "You do not owe me anything," Nathan insisted, but there was something in his expression that made Natalie's heart skip. He was looking at her like she mattered, like she was more than just a burden or a problem to be solved. "Will you stay in Miller's Creek?" Natalie asked, suddenly afraid that he would ride away in the morning and she would never see him again. Nathan hesitated. He had been planning to keep moving south, to find work in one of the bigger ranches, or maybe head toward Los Angeles. But looking at Natalie now, clean and fed and still so fragile despite the strength he could see in her, he found himself reconsidering. I will stay a few days at least, he said. Make sure Caldwell does not come looking for trouble. After that, well, I suppose it depends. On what? Natalie asked quietly. Nathan met her eyes and something passed between them, something neither of them could quite name yet, but both of them felt. On whether I have a reason to stay, he said finally. They stood there in the doorway for a long moment, and Natalie felt her cheeks warming. She had not thought about anything beyond survival for so long that the idea of feeling something more, something deeper, seemed foreign and frightening and thrilling all at once. Get some rest, Nathan said gently. Tomorrow we can figure out what comes next. Natalie nodded and closed the door, but she knew sleep would be difficult. Her mind was racing, her heart was pounding, and for the first time in 3 years, she was thinking about a future that held possibilities instead of just more darkness. The next morning, Natalie woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the distant sound of wagons on the street below. For a moment she panicked, thinking she had overslept and would be punished for missing her work shift. But then memory came flooding back and she nearly sobbed with relief. She was free. She was actually free. There was a knock at the door and Margaret's voice called out, "Miss Sullivan, I brought you some breakfast." Natalie opened the door to find the hotel keeper holding a tray with eggs, bacon, toast, and coffee. "Mr. Irving paid for your meals," Margaret explained. "Said to make sure you ate well. He is very kind," Natalie said softly, taking the tray. Margaret's expression was knowing. "That he is. Man like that does not come along often. You are lucky he rode into that mining camp when he did." After Margaret left, Natalie ate slowly, savoring every bite. Her body was screaming for more food, years of deprivation making her ravenous, but she forced herself to pace. When she had finished, she dressed in the borrowed clothes and braided her hair, which was still damp from washing it again that morning. She looked at herself in the small mirror over the wash basin and barely recognized the young woman staring back. She looked thin and tired, but she also looked free. She found Nathan downstairs in the hotel dining room, reading a newspaper and drinking coffee. He looked up when she approached and stood immediately, pulling out a chair for her. "Good morning," he said. "How are you feeling?" "Like I am in a dream and I am terrified to wake up," Natalie admitted. "I keep thinking something will happen to send me back there." Nathan's jaw tightened. "That will not happen. I promise you that." They sat together and Nathan ordered more coffee. Natalie found herself studying him in the morning light, taking in the details she had been too exhausted to notice the night before. He had a scar along his jawline, and his hands were calloused from hard work. He moved with an easy confidence that came from being comfortable in his own skin, and when he smiled at her, something fluttered in her chest. "I spoke with the sheriff this morning," Nathan said. "Told him about the situation at Copper Ridge. He says there have been complaints before about Caldwell, but no one willing to testify. If you are willing to make a statement, he can investigate." Natalie felt a spike of fear. "What if Caldwell comes after me?" "I will not let that happen," Nathan said firmly. "But you do not have to do anything you are not comfortable with. The choice is yours." Natalie thought about the other workers at the mine, about the men and women who were too afraid to speak up. She thought about how Caldwell had trapped her, how he might be doing the same to others. "I will do it," she said quietly. "Someone has to stand up to him." Nathan's expression filled with respect. "You are braver than you know." They walked to the sheriff's office together, and Natalie gave her statement, recounting the 3 years of unpaid labor, the threats, the impossible debt that her father had supposedly incurred. The sheriff, a grizzled man named Tom Porter who had been enforcing the law for 20 years, listened carefully and took notes. "I will send a deputy to Copper Ridge to review the documents," Sheriff Porter said. If what you are saying is true, Mr. Caldwell is going to find himself in serious legal trouble. Debt bondage is illegal in California. Will she be safe? Nathan asked. I will make sure of it, the sheriff assured him. And Mr. Irving, I appreciate you bringing this to my attention. Too many people would have just ridden past. When they left the sheriff's office, Natalie felt lighter than she had in years. She was taking action, fighting back against the man who had stolen years of her life. And she was not doing it alone. Nathan was beside her, steady and sure, and she found herself wondering what it would be like if he stayed, if this was not just a temporary rescue but the beginning of something more. What will you do now? Nathan asked as they walked back toward the hotel. Do you have family anywhere, friends? Natalie shook her head. My father was an only child and my mother's family disowned her when she married him. They thought he was beneath her. After they both died, I had no one. That is part of how Caldwell was able to trap me so easily. There was no one to question what he was doing. Nathan felt a surge of anger toward the mine owner, mixed with sympathy for Natalie. She had been so alone, so vulnerable. Well, you are not alone anymore, he said quietly. Natalie looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. Why are you being so kind to me? Most men would have expected something in return by now. Nathan stopped walking and turned to face her fully. I am not most men, and you deserve kindness, Natalie. You deserve to be treated with respect and care. What was done to you was wrong, and I am just trying to make it right. Tears pricked at Natalie's eyes again, but these were different from the tears of the night before. These were tears of gratitude and something deeper, something that felt dangerously close to the beginning of love. I have never met anyone like you, she whispered. And I have never met anyone as strong as you, Nathan replied. Surviving what you survived, that takes incredible courage. They stood there on the sidewalk, people passing around them, but in that moment, it felt like they were the only two people in the world. Nathan reached out slowly, giving Natalie time to pull away if she wanted, and gently touched her cheek. She leaned into his hand, her eyes closing, and Nathan felt his heart constrict in his chest. He was falling for her. He knew it was too soon, knew he should be more careful, but there was something about Natalie that called to him. Maybe it was her strength in the face of overwhelming odds, or maybe it was the vulnerability she tried so hard to hide, or maybe it was simply that she saw him as more than just a gun or a hired hand. She saw him as a good man, and that made him want to be the best man he could be. Natalie, he said softly, I know this is fast and I know you have been through hell, but I want you to know that I am not going anywhere. Not until you are truly safe and settled, and even then, only if you want me to go. Natalie opened her eyes and looked at him with an expression that made Nathan's breath catch. What if I do not want you to go at all? She asked quietly. Nathan smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes and made him look younger. Then I would say we should see where this leads. Over the following days, Nathan and Natalie fell into an easy companionship that gradually deepened into something more. Nathan found work at a nearby ranch, doing repairs and helping with the horses, and he spent every evening with Natalie. They would take walks through Miller's Creek, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories. Natalie told him about her childhood, about her mother's death when she was 12, and how her father had done his best to raise her alone. She told him about her dreams of becoming a teacher, dreams that had died when her father was killed in the mine collapse. Nathan listened to every word, and in his eyes, she could see that he believed in her, believed she could still have those dreams if she wanted them. Nathan told her about his own past, about growing up on a ranch in Montana and losing his parents to fever when he was 17. He had been on his own since then, working odd jobs and moving from place to place, never quite finding somewhere that felt like home. But when he talked about his future now, Natalie noticed that his stories included her, as if he could not imagine his path forward without her in it. 3 weeks after Nathan had freed her from Copper Ridge, word came from Sheriff Porter. Caldwell had been arrested for fraud and labor violations. The documents he had claimed proved Natalie's father's debt were forgeries, and the sheriff had also found evidence of similar schemes involving 3 other workers. Caldwell would be going to trial, and he would likely spend significant time in prison. Natalie cried when she heard the news, but these were tears of relief and vindication. Her father's name was cleared, and justice was finally being served. Nathan held her while she cried, his arms strong and comforting around her, and when she finally pulled back to look at him, she knew with absolute certainty that she was in love with him. "Thank you," she said for what felt like the 100th time. "For everything." Nathan cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "You do not need to keep thanking me, Natalie. Helping you, getting to know you, falling in love with you, those are the best things I have ever done." Natalie's heart stuttered. "You love me." "I do," Nathan said simply. "I know it is fast, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are brave and kind and strong, and being with you makes me want to be a better man. I love you, Natalie Sullivan." Natalie felt joy burst through her chest like sunlight breaking through clouds. "I love you too," she breathed. "I never thought I would feel this way about anyone, never thought I would have the chance. But you gave me my life back, and now I want to share it with you." Nathan kissed her then, gentle and sweet, pouring all his feelings into that single moment. Natalie kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathless and smiling. "Marry me," Nathan said suddenly. "I know we have only known each other a few weeks, but I do not want to wait. I want to build a life with you, Natalie. I want to give you everything you have dreamed of." Natalie laughed, the sound bright and free. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church in Miller's Creek, with Sheriff Porter and Margaret the hotel keeper serving as witnesses. Natalie wore a dress that Margaret had helped her make from soft blue fabric, and Nathan wore his best shirt and a new vest he had purchased for the occasion. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed Natalie with such tenderness that Margaret dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. After the wedding, they moved into a small house on the outskirts of Miller's Creek. It was not much, just 3 rooms and a porch, but it was theirs. Nathan continued working at the ranch, and Natalie took a position as a teacher's assistant at the local school, working toward her dream of becoming a full teacher. Every evening, Nathan would come home to find Natalie waiting for him, and they would have dinner together and talk about their days, and neither of them could quite believe how lucky they were. Their first year of marriage was full of small joys and adjustments. They learned each other's habits and preferences, learned how to fight fair and make up with laughter. Nathan taught Natalie to ride horses, and she taught him to read poetry. They would lie in bed at night, talking about their dreams for the future, and slowly, those dreams began to take shape. Natalie discovered she was pregnant in the spring of 1883, and Nathan's joy was so profound that he picked her up and spun her around despite her protests. They spent the following months preparing for the baby, Nathan building a cradle with his own hands while Natalie sewed tiny clothes and blankets. Their friends and neighbors rallied around them, bringing gifts and advice, and Natalie marveled at how different her life was now. She had gone from being completely alone and trapped to being surrounded by community and love. Their son was born in October, a healthy boy with Nathan's dark hair and Natalie's eyes. They named him Thomas, after Natalie's father, and Nathan held him with such gentle reverence that Natalie fell in love with her husband all over again. Watching Nathan with their son, seeing the tender care he took with every feeding and diaper change, Natalie knew that their children would grow up knowing they were cherished. The years passed in a blur of happiness. Nathan eventually saved enough to buy a small piece of land, and he built a house there with his own hands, larger than their first home with room for their growing family. Natalie gave birth to their daughter 2 years after Thomas, a little girl they named Sarah, who had her mother's fierce spirit and her father's kind heart. Natalie achieved her dream of becoming a full teacher, taking over the school when the previous teacher retired. She was beloved by her students, known for her patience and her belief that every child could learn if given the proper encouragement. Nathan expanded his work into breeding horses, developing a reputation for training animals with kindness rather than breaking them with cruelty. Their ranch became successful, not wealthy by any means, but comfortable and secure. On their 10th anniversary, Nathan and Natalie sat on the porch of their home, watching their children play in the yard. Thomas was 12 now, tall and serious like his father, while 8-year-old Sarah was chasing butterflies with determined concentration. A third child, their youngest son James, was napping inside. "You ever think about that day?" Natalie asked quietly. "The day you rode into Copper Ridge?" Nathan reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. "Every day," he admitted. "It was the best day of my life because it brought me to you." Natalie leaned her head on his shoulder. "I was so hopeless before you came. I thought I would die in that mine, forgotten and alone. But you saved me, Nathan. You gave me everything." "We saved each other," Nathan corrected gently. "You gave me a home and a family and a purpose. Before you, I was just drifting. Now I wake up every morning with a reason to be the best man I can be." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over their land, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Their life was not perfect. They had struggles and worries like everyone else, but it was theirs, built on a foundation of love and trust and mutual respect. "I am so grateful you did not just ride past," Natalie whispered. "I am grateful you trusted me enough to leave with me," Nathan replied. "That took more courage than anything I did." Their children called for them then, and they rose together, hand in hand, walking toward the laughter and joy of their family. It had been 12 years since a cowboy had ridden into a mining camp and decided that injustice would not stand. 12 years since a trapped young woman had found hope in a stranger's kindness. From that single act of courage and compassion had grown a love story that would last their entire lives, a partnership built on equality and understanding, and a family that knew what it meant to stand up for what was right. Years continued to pass, bringing their own challenges and triumphs. The children grew, Thomas developing a passion for law after hearing stories of how the sheriff had helped his mother, Sarah following in her mother's footsteps to become a teacher, and James showing his father's gift with horses. Nathan and Natalie grew older together, their love deepening with every shared sunrise and whispered conversation in the dark. When Natalie turned 50, the school board threw her a celebration, and dozens of former students came to honor the woman who had taught them not just reading and arithmetic, but kindness and integrity. Nathan stood at the back of the room, watching his wife accept their gratitude with characteristic grace, and his heart swelled with pride. This woman, who had survived so much, who had been broken down and rebuilt herself stronger, was touching countless lives with her compassion. That night, lying in bed beside her, Nathan traced the lines that time had etched on Natalie's face and told her she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. She laughed and called him a sentimental fool, but her eyes were bright with happy tears. "We have had a good life," she said softly. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "We are not done yet," Nathan replied. "We have grandchildren to spoil and more memories to make." And they did. Thomas married a spirited young lawyer and gave them 3 grandchildren. Sarah married a fellow teacher and had 2 sons. James married late but loved deeply, bringing home a gentle woman who had been widowed young. And together, they had a daughter who was the light of Nathan's elderly years. Nathan and Natalie would sit on their porch, now weathered by decades of sun and rain, and watch their grandchildren play in the same yard where their children had played. They would tell stories about the old days, about mining camps and daring rescues, about falling in love when logic said it was too fast and too soon. The grandchildren would listen with wide eyes, asking questions about the cowboy grandpa who had saved Grandma from the bad mine owner. "Were you scared, Grandpa?" one of them would ask. Nathan would always answer honestly. "I was terrified, but some things are more important than fear. Your grandmother needed help and I could not ride away and live with myself." "Did you know you would fall in love?" another would ask. And Natalie would smile and answer this one. "I think we knew from the first moment, even if we did not have words for it yet. Sometimes your heart recognizes home before your mind catches up." When Nathan turned 65, he finally retired from the hard physical labor of the ranch, though he still went out every morning to greet the horses. His body was slower now, his joints aching in the cold, but his spirit was as strong as ever. Natalie had retired from teaching the year before, and they spent their days in peaceful companionship, reading together, walking slowly through their land, visiting their children and grandchildren. One evening, sitting together watching the sunset paint the sky in familiar, brilliant colors, Natalie turned to Nathan with a question she had never quite asked before. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had ridden past that day, if you had chosen not to get involved?" Nathan considered carefully before answering. "I think about it sometimes," he admitted. "And it terrifies me because I know my life would have been so much emptier. I would have kept drifting, kept searching for something I did not have words for. I would never have known what it was like to truly love and be loved. I would never have known you, and that would have been the greatest tragedy of my life." Natalie blinked back tears. Even after all these years, he could still make her cry with his words. "I would have died there," she said quietly. "In that mine or in that camp. I was giving up, Nathan. I had almost stopped fighting. But then you rode in like something out of a story and you fought for me when I did not have the strength to fight for myself anymore." Nathan pulled her close, and they sat together as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. "We were meant to find each other," he said firmly. "I truly believe that. Every choice I made, every job I took, every road I traveled, it was all leading me to that mining camp at exactly the right moment, leading me to you." "I believe that too," Natalie whispered. "We were meant to be." Their 70 years were quiet but full. Their children visited often, bringing the grandchildren and eventually great-grandchildren. The small house Nathan had built with his own hands was always full of laughter and life. Natalie and Nathan would sit together, their hands clasped, watching their legacy unfold before them. A family built on love and justice and the courage to do what was right even when it was hard. Nathan passed first, at the age of 78, dying peacefully in his sleep with Natalie beside him. She held his hand as he took his last breath, whispering words of love and gratitude for the life they had built together. At his funeral, 3 generations of family gathered to honor the man who had been a husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. a man who had lived his life with integrity and kindness. Natalie lived 4 more years without him, and while she missed Nathan with an ache that never fully faded, she found comfort in their children and grandchildren, in the love that surrounded her. She would tell anyone who asked that she had been blessed beyond measure, that one act of courage from a cowboy she had never met had changed the entire trajectory of her life and created ripples that touched dozens of people. She passed quietly on a spring morning, sitting in the chair on the porch where she and Nathan had spent so many evenings. Her daughter Sarah found her there, a peaceful smile on her face, and they all knew that she had gone to join the love of her life. At Natalie's funeral, her eldest grandson Thomas, named for his great-grandfather, stood to speak. He told the story his grandparents had told so many times, about a mining camp and a cowboy who refused to let injustice stand, about a love that had grown from a single moment of compassion into a lifetime of partnership. He talked about how their love had shaped his entire family, how the values they lived by, courage and kindness and standing up for what was right, had been passed down through generations. "My grandparents taught us that love is not just a feeling," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It is action. It is choosing to stand up for someone who cannot stand up for themselves. It is building a life together based on respect and trust. It is staying committed even when things are hard." Their story started with my grandfather seeing injustice and deciding to end it right then, and it continued for 60 years of mutual devotion and partnership. That is the legacy they left us, and it is one we should all strive to honor. The family gathered at the old house afterward, now maintained by James and his wife, and they shared memories and tears and laughter. They looked at old photographs, at Nathan and Natalie young and in love, middle-aged with their children, elderly and still holding hands. They saw the progression of a life well lived, a love story that had started in the most unlikely of circumstances and had endured through decades of joy and hardship. And in the years that followed, the story of Nathan and Natalie continued to be told. Their great-great-grandchildren would hear about the brave cowboy and the trapped woman he saved, about how love can bloom even in the darkest circumstances, about how one person's courage can change not just one life but many. The house that Nathan built still stood, preserved by the family as a reminder of where they came from, and sometimes on quiet evenings, people swore they could feel the presence of the couple who had started it all, still together, still in love, their story echoing through time as a testament to the power of compassion, courage, and enduring love. The land that Nathan and Natalie had built their life on remained in the family, passed down through generations, and on the highest hill, there stood 2 stones side by side, carved with their names and a simple epitaph that captured the essence of their story. She was trapped. He set her free. Together they built a legacy of love. And that legacy lived on, in their children and grandchildren and all the lives they touched. A reminder that sometimes the most important thing a person can do is refuse to ride past someone in need. Because you never know what miracles might unfold from a single act of courage and kindness on a dusty day in 1882, San Francisco, California.